certain day, which is the day Pearl Harbor Day, and my basement was full of 8 inches of sewage. At that point, I was basically forced into homelessness because the fire department shuts off your heat and electricity, and there's no place to go. And I thought that Anchorage would help.
A car goes dark in an Anchorage parking lot, not because the driver wanted to sleep, because the battery finally gave up. A breath leaves someone's mouth and turns into a pale cloud that vanishes almost instantly. The air is so cold it feels sharp. Inside the car, there's a plastic leg brace, a stack of medical paperwork, and a rent notice that's been folded so many times the creases look permanent. This is what homelessness looks like in Alaska. Not just tents, not just a shelter line. It looks like a dead heater, a closed road, a missed appointment that turns into a missed week, and a night where outside is not inconvenient. It is dangerous. Stay with me, because tonight we're going to break down what the numbers don't show. Why Alaska's risks are uniquely lethal. What is actually helping people survive? And what has to change so survival is not the best we can offer? Welcome to Homeless US News. We tell the truth with humanity. No graphic details, no glamorizing addiction, no rumors dressed up as facts. Just the real story so we can talk about real solutions. Part 1. The count doesn't find everyone. If you want to understand Alaska, start with the geography. This is a place where communities are scattered across enormous distances. In many regions, there is no easy next town over. There are places where the connection between you and help is one plane seat, one ferry ride, one road that can close without warning. And that reality breaks the way America usually measures homelessness. Once a year, the country does a snapshot called the point-in-time count. It's important. It gives us a baseline. In early 2024, the national count was 771,480 people experiencing homelessness on a single night. Alaska's count was 2,686. On paper, that can look small. But Alaska is where the math can lie by omission, because the count mostly captures what can be found: shelters, known camps, people in visible places. In Alaska, many of the hardest cases are not visible. A family doubled up in a crowded apartment in a small village. A woman sleeping in a fishing cabin between storms. A man staying in a garage with no heat, because at least it's not the wind. A teen rotating between couches, trying not to be noticed, because being noticed can mean losing the last place you can safely rest. Those situations often don't show up as unsheltered, but they are homelessness in slow motion. And when something goes wrong, when the friend's landlord finds out, when the relative gets sick, when the job ends, people fall straight into the most dangerous version of homelessness, with no time to prepare. Now bring it closer to Anchorage. Anchorage is Alaska's largest city, and it carries a huge share of the state's crisis. Local system data shows that by the end of December 2024, about 3,070 people were actively experiencing homelessness in Anchorage's response system. About 475 were unsheltered, and shelter utilization was running at full capacity. That's not a headline number. That's a system under load. And in Alaska, under load doesn't just mean inconvenience. It means risk. Because when you can't get inside tonight, you don't just lose comfort. You can lose your phone to the cold, your medication to frozen temperatures, your mobility to an untreated injury, your life to a night you didn't expect to be outside. So when we talk about homelessness here, we have to be honest. The count is real, the crisis is real, and the true number of people in danger is always larger than what can be seen. And there's one more hidden piece the count rarely captures well. People who are technically housed, but only by a thread. The family sleeping in a living room with 6 other relatives. The worker paying so much for rent that a single sick day becomes a disaster. The elder choosing between heat and food, knowing the next rent increase could be the one that breaks them. In Alaska, instability is not a separate category. It's often the first chapter. Part TW. Oh, how a stable life turns fast. Here's the part that scares people. because it's so ordinary. In Alaska, you can do everything right and still fall. Picture someone I'll call Mark, not because it's one person's story, but because it's the pattern we keep hearing in different voices. Mark worked for decades. Union jobs, steady pay, a plan. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. He was just one major problem away from a cascade. Then the basement flooded. The heat went out. The repair estimate wasn't something you could handle with a weekend shift. In many places, you can shop around for help. In Alaska, the crew might be booked out, or far away, or grounded by weather. And when heat goes out in winter, time gets loud. One credit card becomes two. Then the interest starts chewing. Then the job slows. Then the landlord posts a notice. Then Mark is trying to stretch a few nights in a car while he figures it out. And if you're hearing this and thinking, why didn't he just get help? That question makes sense on a warm map. On Alaska's map, help can be a waiting list. It can be an office that closes before you can get there. It can be a shelter where every bed is taken by sundown. It can be a program that needs paperwork you can't keep safe when you don't have a stable place to store it. And this is what makes Alaska brutal. You don't get a long, slow slide. You get a short fall and a hard landing. Local reports in Anchorage point to a major driver of people newly entering homelessness: evictions and inability to pay rent. That's not a mystery. That's the economy. Costs rise. Wages don't keep pace. One injury, one family emergency, one rent increase, one lost shift, and a household that was barely holding on becomes a household in crisis. And when the crisis is winter, there is no soft ground. There's also a quieter version of this fall, one that doesn't look dramatic until it's too late. A person tries to keep a place by skipping medical care. A couple stays housed by cutting meals down to one a day. Someone keeps the lights on by letting a car payment slide. Then the car gets repossessed, and suddenly they've lost transportation, income, and shelter in the same month. In Alaska, everything is connected. When one piece snaps, the rest can follow fast. Part 3: Why Alaska is uniquely lethal. Homelessness is dangerous everywhere, but Alaska changes the rules. First, the weather. In many places, being outside is survivable with discomfort. In Alaska, there are nights where being outside becomes a medical emergency fast. Your body burns energy just to stay warm. Fatigue arrives quicker. Illness hits harder. Small mistakes can become big consequences. Second, distance. In a dense city, an outreach team can make contact with dozens of people in a shift. In Alaska, a team can spend hours traveling to reach a handful. Outside the main urban corridors, access to care can depend on transportation that is fragile in bad weather. A missed ride can turn into a missed week. A missed week can turn into a closed case. A closed case can turn into a person vanishing from the system until the next emergency. Third, infrastructure. Even in the city, shelters can fill early. And beyond city limits, shelter options can be scarce or non-existent. That means services exist is not the same as services are reachable. A bed 30 miles away without transportation is not a bed. It's a rumor. Fourth, culture and inequity. Alaska Native communities carry extraordinary resilience and also the heavy, ongoing impact of displacement, underinvestment, and barriers to care that did not appear overnight. In Anchorage's own system data, Alaska Native individuals make up more than half of people experiencing homelessness. That does not happen by accident. It happens when history shapes housing access, education access, health access, and the margin of error a family is allowed to have. And then there's language, paperwork, and how programs are designed. If forms are only in English, people don't fail the system. The system fails people. If rules assume stable schedules and easy transportation, people don't lack discipline. The program was built for a life they don't have. This is what Alaska teaches again and again. Homelessness is not only a personal crisis, it is a logistics crisis. It is a design crisis. It is a systems crisis. And the cold makes every flaw louder. One more rule Alaska adds is this: emergencies multiply. A small infection becomes serious because getting to a clinic is hard. A minor injury becomes long-term because rest is impossible outside. A broken phone becomes a lost job because the call never gets returned. In warmer places, you can sometimes wait it out. In Alaska, waiting can cost you everything. Part 4. The friction of climbing back. There are 3 things you need to climb out of homelessness almost anywhere in America: an address, a working phone, and reliable transportation. In Alaska, those 3 things are harder to hold onto, and losing any one of them can collapse the climb. No address means you can't easily replace ID. No ID means you can't complete benefits paperwork. No benefits means you can't stabilize. No stabilization means the next step housing stays out of reach. No phone means you miss calls from employers and case managers. You miss the one opening that had your name on it. You miss the window. And transportation matters more than most people realize. When routes close, or when money for gas is gone, or when you simply can't get across town, it's not just a missed appointment, it's a missed chance to stay connected to the system. And systems often punish disconnection. They call it non-compliance. But in Alaska, sometimes it's just snow. Sometimes it's a canceled flight. Sometimes it's a vehicle that won't start. This is why people get trapped. Not because they want to be, but because the climb requires stability before stability is granted. Now look at the winter response reality. Anchorage has expanded emergency cold weather capacity. Those beds matter. They save lives. But the system notes a hard truth. Demand still exceeds capacity at times, and barriers like pets, being a couple, and trauma can keep people from entering even when a bed exists. That's not a moral failure. That's program design meeting human reality. If you want someone to come inside, you have to build inside around what people actually face: fear, trauma, relationships, and the fact that for many, their pet is not a luxury. It's family. It's protection. It's the one bond they have left. When the cold is extreme, the door has to open fast. Not after 3 documents. Not after a referral to another address. Not after the last bus has already stopped running. Low barrier has to mean low barrier in real life. And there's a detail most people don't think about until they've lived it: storage. If you are unhoused, your belongings are not stuff. They are survival. Your sleeping bag, your boots, your medication, your papers, your phone charger, your child's school documents, your one warm coat. When people lose their belongings through displacement, theft, or a rushed move, it can reset their recovery to 0. Any plan that ignores storage ignores reality. Part 5. What's working, even when it's stretched. Now, here's the part we refuse to skip. Because the story is not only collapse, the story is also people building lifelines in a place that does not forgive delays. When Alaska's response works best, it looks like speed, warmth, and coordination. It looks like winter warming sites that stay open when people actually need them, not just when it's convenient. It looks like staff who treat intake like a conversation, not an interrogation. It looks like safe storage so someone doesn't lose their entire life during a move. It looks like outreach that checks the same spots daily, because in winter, "We'll come back next week" can be too late. It also looks like community. In Alaska, faith groups and volunteers fill gaps in ways bureaucracy cannot. People open doors. People share rides. People bring hot drinks and warm socks. People help charge phones. They do it not for applause, but because they know what the cold can do. And some of the smartest housing prevention in Alaska doesn't even wear that label. In many communities, stability is tied to the local economy, to seasonal work, to subsistence patterns, to the cost of fuel, to what happens when a family loses the ability to keep heat running. Prevention is not only a program. Sometimes prevention is the small support that arrives on time, the short-term rent help that lands before the notice becomes an eviction, the utility support that keeps heat on through the worst month, the legal aid that prevents a crisis from becoming permanent, the repair that keeps a home safe instead of forcing a family out. This is the lesson. In Alaska, prevention is often cheaper than response and faster than recovery. And there's another piece that matters deeply: culturally grounded navigation. When programs hire navigators who understand Alaska Native communities, who understand immigrant households, who can translate not just language but expectations. Outcomes change. People keep appointments. People don't disappear between steps. The system becomes a little less maze and a little more bridge. That isn't extra. That is core infrastructure. And here's one more thing that works quietly in the background: consistent relationships. People don't come inside because a poster told them to. They come inside because someone they trust says, "I'll walk with you." The strongest outreach isn't just supply delivery. It's follow through. It's a name remembered. It's a promise kept. It's seeing the same face again after a storm. In a place where the environment is harsh, consistency is a form of safety. Part 6. The next step, from surviving winter to ending the cycle. So what does Alaska need next? Not slogans. Not the usual political fight where everyone wins points and no one gets housed. Alaska needs a practical winter plan built like an emergency response. Because winter is predictable. It arrives on schedule. We can see it coming. First, Alaska needs more heat first, low-barrier winter sites. If it's below freezing, safety cannot be conditional on paperwork. A warm room with staffing, basic storage, and clear pathways into longer-term housing is not being soft. It is being real about what the cold does. Second, Alaska needs services that travel. Mobile teams that include basic health care, benefits navigation, and culturally competent support. Not here's a referral, a real handoff, a real next step. Third, Alaska needs prevention money that shows up early. If a family is one bill away in October, waiting until January is too late. The state and city can save lives and money by treating early prevention like a priority, not an afterthought. Fourth, Alaska needs winter-ready interim housing. Not just mats on floors, but options like small, insulated units that can act as a bridge, places with doors that lock, and a path forward that doesn't reset every morning. Fifth, Alaska needs coordination you can see. A shared dashboard, real-time knowledge of where beds are open, what hours are active, where outreach is focused, and where the emergency needs are rising. Not to shame anyone, to aim resources where they save the most lives. And finally, Alaska needs a serious commitment to equity measured, not promised. When more than half of people experiencing homelessness in Anchorage's system are Alaska Native, the solution cannot be neutral in the way it's delivered. It must be fair in the way it reaches people. That means partnership, trust, cultural design, language access, and accountability that goes beyond press releases. Because the cold does not care what we meant to do. The cold cares what we actually built. And there's one practical detail that can't be skipped: staffing. A shelter bed on paper is not a shelter bed if there aren't enough trained staff to run it safely. Outreach routes don't happen without drivers, navigators, and medical partners. If Alaska wants a real winter plan, it has to fund the people who carry it out so the system doesn't burn out by February. Outro, the line we draw before nightfall. Here is what I want you to carry away tonight. Homelessness in Alaska is not just poverty. It is exposure. It is what happens when a system moves slower than winter. It is what happens when a missed ride becomes a missed month. It is what happens when a person is told, "Come back tomorrow," and tomorrow is colder. But Alaska is also something else. It is neighbors who still believe that leaving someone outside is not just how it is. It is communities that step in when the map makes help hard. It is proof that small actions done on time can be the difference between survival and loss. So here's your call to action, and it's simple. If you live in Alaska, learn what's open in winter. Save the local outreach number. Keep a small winter kit in your car if you can. And if you see someone in distress, don't assume someone else will handle it. Make the call. Stay present long enough to make sure help can find them. If you run a space, a workplace, a community center, a faith building, consider how you can support day warming hours, charging stations, and on-site navigation. 2 hours of warmth can stabilize an entire week. If you vote, vote like winter is real. Support funding that opens doors, not just debates. Ask leaders for numbers, dates, and proof. How many warm beds this winter? How many exits to housing? How many people still housed after 6 months and 1 year? And wherever you live, remember this: the frontier isn't just a place on a map. It's a promise people make to each other when conditions are harsh. A promise that says, you don't get left behind out here. This is Homeless US News. If you want us to cover your city or your region next, tell us where you are in the comments. Share this video with someone who thinks homelessness is only a big city issue. And if you stay with us, we will keep reporting these stories with facts, with dignity, and with the stubborn belief that survival should never be the best a society can offer. Because in Alaska, night always comes. The question is whether we will keep building a world where people have a safe place to be when it does.